Hello and welcome to another edition of our regular podcast, Recycle, Don't Be a Waster, on all things recycling and waste management related. In our last episode we covered some controversial or potentially controversial statements by Boris Johnson regarding plastic recycling, but today we want to look at, I suppose, is it a conspiracy theory? Certainly this year, more than most years, conspiracy theories and distrust in government and all those sort of things are probably more in the press than ever before. And I'll let you into a little secret. I'm a big fan of conspiracy theories. I enjoy a good conspiracy. So today we'll cover a waste-related conspiracy, which is that recycling is just a big con job. That I suppose many people do believe that recycling there's an aspect of fakery about it, and that people, the waste companies, misrepresent where the waste is going, and a large percentage of people, I'm not sure how many, suspect that some or all of the recycling, cardboard, bottles, etc., just go straight to landfill, that the trucks just head in the same direction to the landfill and just dump it, and nothing gets recycled. So that's the conspiracy theory that we're going to look at today. And I suppose I'm not going to do what people call fact-checking nowadays. There's these things on the internet called fact-checkers, which tend to be just dismissing of conspiracy theories. You know, we're going to entertain this one, and we will, if there's a grain of truth to it, we will, we'll admit that. So I suppose the first thing we will state about this, I personally think people believe this because they just distrust authority, they just distrust business, and they have a sneaking suspicion that somebody is taking financial advantage of them, and that the whole, the effort they put into washing their containers, putting the cardboard boxes in one bin, etc., that it's just a farce, and it's just pulling the wool over their eyes, and that the waste companies just pretend one thing and really just want to save money and dump it at landfill and make profits from it. So the reason I'm going to say, in general, the answer to this, I'll give you a spoiler alert, the answer to what we're going to cover in this podcast is no, it is not the case. Recycling is not a con job. There are aspects where sometimes it may end up in landfill, and we'll cover those, but in the vast majority of cases, recycling that you see, it is real. Okay, so we'll run through the reasons why. The first reason why is cold hard money. Businesses, waste collection, recycling companies, they're in it for money. One of the richest people in Australia, richest families, are the Pratt family, who run a recycling business called Visi, and they've made an awful lot of money completely legitimately by helping society through recycling, mostly in cardboard recycling, and that's in Australia, and many countries will have similar. The term resource recovery is very commonly used, and the reality of it is a lot of what we throw out is valuable. Maybe not to the person throwing it out, but if you repurpose, recycle, reuse that, whether it's timber, glass, cardboard, etc., it can be very valuable. Certainly metal, tin, aluminium, etc., again, very valuable commodities that can be reasonably easily recycled, and there's people willing to take it and pay for that, the end user. I had read recently that aluminium, we've covered the recent COP talks in Scotland, whereby whereby we're trying to reduce global emissions. Aluminium in most developed countries, in Australia, for example, the smelting of bauxite into aluminium, it takes up huge amounts of energy, up to 11 to 12%, I believe, of most countries' actual energy usage, just to make aluminium, which is then used for cans, etc. So you can see the money and effort and energy that can be saved by recycling these metals and these products. We always say, take an extreme example, a gold necklace, a valuable piece of metal. You wouldn't throw it into the landfill because it's valuable. Even lead, there was a spate in certain countries of stealing lead materials from roofs, etc. in recent years, even melting down pennies because that's valuable material. So the reality of it is there's money to be made from certain materials that, if they're throwing them into landfill, would be very foolish. Reusing them, recycling them makes money for the companies, and that is fundamentally the reason why they are recycled, because somebody commercially profits from that. The ancillary benefits to the environment are separate, but let's just focus on pure hard cash and actual value drivers for the companies in this instance. Secondly, a lot of countries now place levies or fines or fees on dumping at landfill. They've tried to make it more and more costly to dispose of at landfill and cheaper relatively, not absolutely, but relatively, to recycle. And the way they do this is quite blunt. They apply a tax or a levy on disposing at landfill. In the state of New South Wales, in Australia, it's circa $130 to $140 per tonne of waste that you throw in the landfill. So in reality, if you can recycle, if it's cardboard or metal or glass or whatever it is, if you can recycle that, you're immediately saving that $140 on the landfill levy. So again, that increases the financial reasons for a company to recycle. We will get into the tougher stuff, whereby once you get into plastic, once you get into the worlds of plastic, yes, it does become tougher. Also in glass, there are issues in glass in Australia whereby too much is, you've probably seen on television, glass stockpiles, whereby recycled glass, there's nobody to take it. And so it is fundamentally just stockpiled, waiting for some eventual off-taker. We will cover in a future episode how the deindustrialization of many developed nations has seen a significant problem, or has created a real problem, in the recycling or circular economy. In a circular economy where recycling plays a vital part, fundamentally, when an item is recycled, you need a producer or a manufacturer to use it in their goods. But in many Western countries or developed nations, we've actually outsourced those manufacturing processes to third countries, mostly in Asia, China, for example. So in reality, what we've done is as we've imported more and more product from China, we then use it, we throw it away, we then want to recycle it. But the big problem is domestically, there's not really an off-taker or a manufacturer willing to use it. So that's an issue we'll get into in a future episode that probably has driven, it's probably exacerbated some of these issues when we get into the more complex recycling materials such as plastic. So with plastic, it is harder to recycle. The off-takers, when I say off-takers, I mean purchasers or end users of the recycled product, are lower, and the material is fundamentally not as recyclable as some others. And so in this instance, there is a grey area where some of it will, yes, end up in landfill. More of it in some countries would be burned fundamentally for energy or just for destruction. But there is a grey area where potentially a large percentage of this waste is not recycled and actually ends up in landfill. And this tends to be in certain geographic areas, certainly in Australia, outside capital cities where transport is longer and more expensive, etc., to facilities. If you're a long way removed from facilities, A, and B, from eventual end users, potentially this makes it more difficult to recycle those plastics. So this is an area where potentially the conspiracy theory has some legs, and we'll cover in a future episode more on this, such as China refusing to accept low-quality plastic recycling specifically over the last couple of years. So in this instance, potentially there will be some in theory, recyclable materials ending up in landfill. Another aspect we'll have to mention here is when you get into the world of wish cycling, which is just assuming things will be recycled, but the person disposing of it in the bin is not doing any work. In this instance, to some extent, if you make it difficult for the material to be separated, you're increasing the chance of it going to landfill. People will throw things into their commingled or mixed recycling bin that shouldn't be there. Items such as soft plastics, plastic bags, those sort of materials that should not go into that bin. And in this instance, even though they can be recycled through a different facility, they probably will end up in landfill. So it's not in theory that it's a con job. Well, to some extent, someone is believing something that isn't true. They are wishing that this item will be recycled and then seeking to blame somebody else. The commingled bin or the mixed recycling bin, it's not a perfect solution. It is a versatile solution and offers recycling for items like plastic bottles, cans, containers, but not for everything. And so there's a grey area there that is, I suppose, caused by this idea of wish cycling, but also a lack of education, and thirdly, also just a lack of care by people. Because of the way, I suppose, municipal collections have been run, for a long time, the collectors do not reject, if the bin is contaminated, so if they turn up to a house and somebody's disposed of general waste in that recycling bin, it tends not to be rejected. In the vast majority of cases, it will be emptied. But then that increases the chance that load will not actually be recycled. So there's an honesty game there, that, clarification as to what will be recycled, what won't be, and the percentages that are recycled from every load. I'll be honest, it does depend. But if we do on this spectrum, we'll say cardboard and paper, yes, almost certainly nearly always recycled unless an error happens. But in nearly all cases, metals, yes, many plastics, yes, but with a grey area at the end whereby low quality, contaminated bins will potentially end up in landfill. There are other instances where you'll see them regularly on the press. Recycling facilities are at capacity or are closed for some reason, maintenance, construction, etc. And in those instances where there is no taker of the material, it will end up in landfill. And you'll see those reasonably, they'll happen on a regular enough basis. For example, in Victoria last year or 2 years ago, there was a fire at a Bayshore recycling plant in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, and that led to quite a bit of recycling material from the Geelong area specifically going to landfill for a number of months. Thankfully that has been rectified, but you'll see these things on a reasonably regular basis. At the end of the day, I think we've covered this in a previous episode, to recycle something, just because it is recyclable in theory does not mean it will be in practice. You need a separation mechanism, a collection system, a facility, and somebody to pay for it. And if one of those 4 items drops or falls away, it fundamentally will not be recycled. It will end up in landfill or incineration, whichever is used in that area. So I think that's enough to cover on this point. I think as a rule, there's no mass, or there is no conspiracy theory. There's no conspiracy behind the scenes tricking people and actually dumping at landfill. There is, although saying that, there will be, I just thought of an instance, you do get fly tipping. Of course you do. You get fly tipping in certain areas whereby operators will take the material and fundamentally dump it illegally to avoid levies, to avoid fees. So they'll collect the charge from their customers and then just dump it with no cost to themselves, hence increasing their profit. End of the day, that is a criminal offence and shall be brought up with the police. Thankfully, that is, in most jurisdictions, that is a minor, at least in Australia, that's a reasonably minor issue. But of course, from time to time, you will see these things occur in the press and in the news. So in that instance, it is a conspiracy in the theory that it is a criminal conspiracy to defraud people and also damage the environment. And so, yes, on the macro level, I would say no. On the macro level, it's hard to say exactly, 85 to 90% of collected materials will be recycled as well as possible. So, yeah, I think, like any conspiracy theory, they stem up from sometimes a grain of truth, and then a grain of truth can grow into a great oak tree of conspiracy. In this instance, probably you don't deserve an oak tree, but potentially there is enough substance to it to not let this conspiracy theory completely die and disappear. But I think the more education we can get through podcasts such as this, through better government information, and I suppose honesty from all the players who, rather than pretending that recycling is perfect, that recycling captures everything, admit the flaws. Every system has flaws, and if we admit those flaws, we can improve them, fill the gaps, and increase recycling and the environmental outcomes. So I think, that's where we leave it today. I'll be interested to hear your feedback, and again, we'll leave you with the slogan: recycle, don't be a waster.